Thank you, Doug. Somebody should get on the other side, maybe.
Yes. Somebody has to be to his left.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. I'm announcing today a free tutoring program for students grades 1 through 8 in public and charter schools who did not test proficient in reading or writing or math. Writing is actually related to reading because students are asked to understand a passage and write about it. So reading comprehension is a big part of that. The amount of this program is $40 million. It'll pay for 1.3 million hours of tutoring. So you might wonder, where did this money come from? The federal government provided the schools with what are called ESSER funds. Arizona got $2.7 billion. 90% or more of that went to the districts. The Department of Education got $130 million. And that $130 million was for a very specific purpose, and that is to make up for learning loss during COVID. And that went to my predecessor, sent that out to various vendors, and we wanted to be sure it was working because the program ends in September of 2024. So there's only a year left. We want to be sure the funds are actually used. Anything not used goes back to the federal government then, and we want to make sure that the funds are actually used for to make up for learning loss. So we sent out a memo to the vendors, and we asked them to let us know, show data showing that their efforts have increased learning of the students. Those that were not able to do so, we canceled their contracts and took the money back. If they can't do it, we will do it. Also, some of the programs were doing fine, but they weren't spending at a rate fast enough to use up the money by next September. So we let them have enough funds to continue at the rate they were going, but we do want to be sure that nothing goes back to the federal government, so we took back part of their funds. That all came to really in excess of $40 million. I'm announcing it as a $40 million program. If we find that we've made any errors in money we took back, we've got a margin for error with respect to the amount of money that we have. I have one obsession in life, and my obsession is that we increase the proficiency levels of the students in the schools and that we help the teachers achieve academic progress for those students. That is my obsession. That is our goal. All 600 people in this department know that that is our goal, and if they were working on something else under prior administrations, we changed what they were doing. So everybody's working for that one goal, which is to improve academic performance in the schools. Our mission statement is that we are a service organization dedicated to raising academic outcomes and empower parents. So we're talking here, we are a service organization in that, for example, we have developed improvement teams to go out and help the schools do better. This didn't exist under my immediate predecessors. And so we have a broad program to improve academic outcomes, and this $40 million tutoring program will be an important part of it. In addition, now the tutoring can be given by teachers in the schools or by private vendors. Some of the private vendors do very well. Some of them guarantee if your child does not learn to read when we've tutored them, you get your money back. So we're doing a request for proposals from vendors, and this can be done by teachers in the schools or by vendors. And this will help the teachers improve their income. The teachers will be paid $30 an hour, and then if they make 6 months of progress within the 6-week period, they get a stipend of an additional $200. So a teacher that devoted himself or herself to conducting this program throughout the school year, and who achieve success with the students could increase their income by about $8,000. As many of you will know, I was a strong supporter of a bill that Matt Gress had offered to increase teacher income by $10,000. I was very disappointed that it did not pass, and so I'm doing whatever I can to increase teacher income. We must pay our teachers more. No school is better than the teachers in the classroom, and our surrounding states pay more, and we can't afford, we're losing teachers to our surrounding states. We can't continue to do that. I have with me Michelle Udall, who is the Associate Superintendent for School Improvement, Joseph Guzman, who is the Associate Superintendent for Research, and Catherine Barrett, who is the Associate Superintendent for Academic Success or Academic Achievement. Michelle has been given the job of determining which money needs to come back. She's analyzed all the results we've gotten from our emails, and she'll be prepared to answer any questions you have about that if you have any. Joseph Guzman has developed the details of the program. If anybody's interested in the details, he can talk to you for 10 or 15 minutes about that, or you can ask him a specific question, but he knows all the details about how we plan to implement the program, although it probably will evolve somewhat, but based on our plans right now. And Catherine Barrett is the Associate Superintendent for Academic Achievement, and she, within her division, is English language learners, and she can talk about what we're doing to be sure English language learners in structured English immersion learn reading, writing, and math. And also, before she came to the department, she taught in high school, and she taught students to read. Now, how did it happen that students went through 8 years of education and entered high school unable to read? This is a very important question. What's going on in those schools and in those classrooms? This is something that needs to be addressed, and explains in part the obsession that I've spoken to you. We have to make up for the deficiencies of our predecessors and make sure that the students learn more and we have better academic progress. As I mentioned, the deadline for spending these funds is September 30, 2024, and one of the things we want to be sure is that no money goes back to the federal government. And anyone who's interested in this tutoring program, we will have a web page on it on our website, azed.gov, by September 15th, and the cover page will have a link so that any parents who are interested in their students, they just need to go to azed.gov, push the link, and they'll get a full description of the choices they have. And we're open to your questions, either for myself or for any of our associate superintendents.
Let's start off with the basics, and I realize maybe you're going to be deferring to your trustee assistant.
Yeah.
$40 million over 600,000 kids in K-8, because I assume this is a K-8 program. Doesn't
1-8.
1-8, okay. Still, 500,000, 600,000 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Is this needs-based, academics-based? I mean, who, or is
It's
it just
academics-based. If they didn't perform proficient on one of our statewide tests, they qualify. If too many students apply, I guess it'll be a first-come, first-served basis.
Any idea about how many students in 1-8 did not perform proficient in reading, math, or?
Yeah, in reading and writing, which is one test, 60% of the kids did not perform as proficient, and in math, 66% of the kids did not perform as proficient. Other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
How many grants were canceled over the weekend? Like, what was the number?
You need to talk a little louder, please.
Yeah, no. What number of grants was canceled outright, and how many were, I guess, modified?
I'll let Michelle answer that.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. We looked over all of the grants that were remaining, how they had been spending down money, and whether or not they gave us evidence of academic improvement, academic gains by students, and about 27 ended up either canceled or reduced.
Can you share some more information on what you used to decide?
Sure.
if someone was using grants?
We had asked schools to, or not schools, but the vendors that had received the grants, we asked them to send in information on academic gains. We left it very open so that they could submit any evidence they had of academic gains that the students that they were working with were showing, or students in the classes of teachers that they were working with. We wanted to make sure it was very open for them to show those gains. We received those. Some of them showed significant gains, and some of them did not give us any data that showed any kinds of academic gains with the students that they were working with. We also looked at whether or not they were spending the money down in a way that it would be spent by the end of the time period. So the grant, they had a 2-year calendar on their grant, and we're more than 1 year into it. So some of these had spent less than a quarter of their grant money over the first more than half of the grant period. So in some cases, if they showed that they were having good academic outcomes with students, we just reduced the grant. If they were not showing academic outcomes, we would have canceled it.
And my understanding was you gave 5 days for organizations to do that. Is that accurate? If we talk about that time frame?
That's accurate. We asked them to provide that data within 5 days. Some of them we received a little bit later, and we accepted that whenever it came in.
And if I could add,
Go ahead.
we'll still receive it. If somebody says, I couldn't get it within the 5 days, as I mentioned earlier, we have significantly more than the $40 million that I've announced, and that leaves us a margin for error. So if someone says, well, I couldn't get it to you earlier, but here it is now, we can change our minds and let them keep their grant.
So let me make sure I understand how this works.
Just to let other people ask, and then we'll come back to you.
The U.S. Department of Education had to approve state spending plans for ESSER money. Excuse me, Howie. Thank you. Did the Department of Education approve the money, the grants that you're talking about, that you clawed back?
So the Department of Education approved the overall plan, and we are beginning to talk with them about this shift in the funding. But this money that we're specifically talking about is for COVID-related learning loss. So we are still spending it within that plan of using it on COVID-related learning loss.
Do you need the Department of Education U.S. Department of Education approval to take this money back and change the plan?
No, part of our responsibility is to monitor the outcomes of the grantees and then to make responsible actions if they are not showing the outcomes that we've asked for.
Yes.
Have you found methods that work versus that didn't work? And this go round, are you going to target those who need the tutoring more uniformly than maybe what you inherited from folks who didn't do enough?
You're talking about more effective and less effective methods of tutoring?
I mean, have you noticed that from, and the people that you've clawed back some of the money from, did you notice that there were achievement laxes that maybe the others had that you may want to mimic?
Well, I don't think, none of these were tutoring programs, were they? No, none of these were tutoring programs, so there wasn't anything we noticed. We just, we weren't using any subjective criteria. It was purely data-driven. If they could show academic progress, they kept their money. If they did not show academic progress in the data, then we took it back.
So what were these programs then?
Can I just follow up? Yeah. Helios here locally, and as well a scholar from the Hoover Institute at Stanford, have said that they acknowledge that there's a big problem here with learning loss nationwide, not just in Arizona. But Helios says this is something that's going to take years to fix in the younger education. You have a year to use this money. Are you now already planning beyond September of 2024? Because it sounds like, just reading from what I read today, that the problem is so great that it's going to take years of commitment, not just one.
We're going to do our best to achieve as much as we can with the year that we have of these funds. We might ask the legislature to continue it if we can show that it's successful, and then it'll be up to the legislature and the governor.
Can you tell me what kind of student is in need of this tutoring?
Those who did not pass proficient on the reading test, which also included writing, or the math test. And as I mentioned earlier, that is 60% with respect to the reading test and 66% with respect to the math test.
Would that be folks considered African American, Hispanic, poor?
No, race has nothing to do with it. I'm looking purely at academic performance. That's all I'm looking at.
Because Helios was saying that Native Americans, Hispanic, African Americans, low income, most likely to fall behind before COVID, during COVID,
Yeah.
after COVID.
Well, I
So
mentioned to
I'm
you.
just wondering if you're targeting these schools that have those students. Do you
Right.
think those will be the schools that get this money
Yeah.
to help those students?
I mentioned to you this is part of an overall program to increase academic performance, and as gave an example was the school improvement teams that Michelle is in charge of. But we're also targeting Native Americans, and we have, I think we've announced already that we're providing the Native Americans with hundreds of pads that have great programs on them for teaching reading and math. And the beauty of them is they don't need broadband, because on the reservations a lot of times they don't have broadband. These pads don't need broadband. Everything is already internal to them. So we are doing that.
Is this
Yes.
tutoring going to be compulsory?
No, it's not compulsory. No, the parents have to ask for it. Yes.
A number of Arizona schools have received federal money. A number of them are using it on tutoring. Can you talk to me about the decision to run sort of a separate tutoring effort, given that that's happening at districts?
Yeah, the districts got 90% of the money. The total amount given was $2.77 billion, and the state, the Department of Education of the state, got $130 million specifically to deal with learning loss due to COVID. And so I'm talking about the $130 million, but the districts had $2.77 billion to spend, and I hope they did it effectively. But our job is to monitor the $130 million that were distributed from this department. Yes.
It seems like a pretty aggressive scan of who is being successful or not. And looking at the long list of grantees, many focused on social and emotional learning. Were those one of your focuses in deciding which ones should continue?
Yeah, let me respond to that. I believe that emotional problems can interfere with learning, and a student comes to school very upset about what's going on at home. It's tough for them to learn. And in our school safety program, this department has funded 565 social workers and counselors in the schools. So the student who has emotional problems has somebody to talk to. I've been attacked for that by some people who claim that these social workers and counselors can keep secrets from parents or encourage kids to keep secrets from parents. That is an entirely false attack. Neither social workers nor counselors are permitted to keep things confidential from the parents of the students. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to clear that up, because I've been attacked for supporting benefits for students with respect to their emotional health, which I think does affect their learning. In fact, it's almost twice as many as police officers that I funded with school safety program, even though, as you all know, I put a big emphasis on the need for police officers in our schools. So what we're talking about now is if you had a program that was developed, that was directed toward students' emotional health, which can affect learning, all you have to do is show us that it did affect learning. If you can give us data that shows your improvement of student emotional health resulted in better academic progress, then you got to keep the funds. If you don't have that data, you did not. Did I say that accurately?
That's accurate.
Thank you.
So were SEL programs singled out?
Nothing was singled out. All you had to do was show us data that you were making, that you could show academic results for the money that you spent. That was the sole criteria that Michelle applied.
So I'm trying to understand, this is tutoring. What are the programs that are being funded now? Are these school-wide, classroom-wide? The money that's gone out there, the money that you got. If that wasn't tutoring, what is being funded now?
Okay, I'll let Michelle answer that.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. You mean the grants that continued, or the ones that
Well,
were?
the ones that have been funded up until this point, obviously they weren't individual tutoring programs like you're announcing. I'm trying to understand what we're transitioning from in some cases to.
It was a wide variety of things. In some cases, it was either mental health or social emotional learning. In some cases, it was more academic based. It was training teachers on specific things or different programs like that. There was a pretty wide variety. And as he said, we asked for basically two criteria. One was we looked at the rate they were spending at to see whether or not some of that money was going to have to be returned to the feds at the end of the period. But the other one was just, were the students that they were working with making academic gains?
Okay, now, let me come back to the teachers, the $30 an hour and all the
Right,
rest of that
mhm.
stuff. Because you say they can make, $8,000. So a teacher would take time with, oh, now you broke it.
It's in one piece.
So a teacher would take separate time after school with each one child,
They could do as many as 3 at a time.
3 at a time.
They'd still get paid $30 an hour, but they could get, if all 3 advanced 6 months and 6 weeks, they could get $600, right? Yeah, they could get $600.
And then the private tutors, also $30 an hour, but then left up to the parents to decide to hire?
Well, the private tutors have their own criteria, and we'll have requests for proposals, and we'll review the proposals, and like any other kind of state contract, we will award based on the proposal. But we can't dictate to them the hourly rate or any of that. They'll tell us what they can do and what their rules are, and we'll decide which ones should be awarded.
Could any of this money involve hiring more teachers or assistants to help double up on one-on-one time with the kids?
Michelle's shaking her head no, so I'll say no.
Well, that raises an interesting question. You've been in the legislature, you've seen all the arguments about class size over the years. Do you believe that class size, you got a teacher with 15 kids versus a teacher with 25 or 30 or 35, do you believe class size matters?
I believe class size matters, but that's not the point of this particular program. The point of this particular program is to address what I believe is the most effective way to get students to increase their proficiency in reading, writing, and math, which is to provide with them individual tutoring. And when I say individual tutoring, the teacher can tutor just one person or 3 if the teacher chooses to, up to 3, no more than 3. But that's the most effective way to increase a student's proficiency.
And how many sessions can this teacher have with 1 or 3 students? Is it $30 an hour and they could have 8, 9, 10 sessions with that group of students?
It's 4 weeks,
6-week sessions.
6-week session, but 4 days a week.
6 weeks, 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, last year, if I'm correct, in testing, we saw an 11% decline in math scores, right? 4% in English. Have you seen any signs that any of the tutoring to date has had an impact positively on those numbers? Because you're expecting new numbers, what, do you have them now, or going to report on them in a couple of weeks, or I don't know how that goes?
No, I don't think we've taken data on that's that specific on how tutoring affected or what class size affected or anything like that. We will have test scores, which I think will be distributed in September or October, but we haven't done the kind of study you're talking about.
Can I add to that for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a lot of data nationally to show that tutoring is pretty much the most impactful way to improve student academic outcomes. And there were some of the programs that were grantees currently did include some tutoring, and those did show academic gains. And so we obviously didn't end any of the ones that were already doing tutoring and showing academic gains. So yeah, there is some evidence within the grantees that those that were doing tutoring were already seeing good academic gains.
So how do you test after 6 weeks? We only have these tests on a regular basis.
Right,
So
the
somebody
schools-
tests for 6 weeks.
The schools will have their own tests, and we've asked them to do a crosswalk to what we call proficiency, so that there'll be consistency, but they use their own tests. Is that right?
No, that's not.
No? Joseph wants to correct me. Go ahead.
Never mind.
So we're going to send out an RFP for a test provider. They will do pre and post tests before, at the beginning of the session, the 6-week session, at the end of the 6-week session. They will test for grade level gains, and those tests will be formative tests, directly to, assessing the student.
So how much of the $40 million will that absorb, that contract?
We are not sure yet because we haven't seen the responses. It's not insignificant because they're going to be involved with every student, and we're going to make sure that those are secure tests that are verifiable, and so we don't expect it'll be insignificant, but we don't know yet exactly how much of the total 40 million it will take.
Do you have a sense of how many students benefit from $40 million worth of tutoring? I mean, have you put a number on the?
Tom, you want
I put a number on the number of hours, 1.3 million hours. We haven't brought that back to the number of students, but you could do the arithmetic.
Is it certified teacher, or will only certified teachers be able to access these funds, like when you say public school teachers?
Well, it's teachers in the public schools and the charter schools. So some of the charter school teachers are not certified. And of course, the private vendors may or may not have certified teachers.
I think it's in an environment where there's a teacher shortage, I think a lot of educators already feel like they do extra work beyond sort of the hours of the school day. Are you concerned about finding people to staff this effort?
Well, the biggest complaints I have, aside from teachers complaining about administrators not supporting them on discipline, which is another subject that we're working on, the biggest complaints we have is their salaries. They need more income. And so I think we're doing a lot to help them in that regard.
I met one over the weekend, a Camelback High School teacher driving me via Uber to my, get my car fixed. That's drinking. On a serious note,
Yeah.
I want to go back to Michelle Udall. So what's the conversation you need to have with the Department of Education about what you're doing with this money? I want to make sure I understood what you said originally.
So are you referring to the grantees that?
The US, so
Oh, with the US Department of Ed?
Education
Oh, okay.
Approved
So
plans.
they've,
So what is the
okay.
conversation you need to have with DOE?
Really, we just let them know that we are doing a big statewide tutoring program. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and simple. We will make sure they're filled in on the details. But other than that, we're not repurposing it from one category to another. We're keeping it within the COVID-related learning loss bucket, and in fact, much more directly focused on COVID-related learning loss.
And
So.
can we get a list of the 27 grantees who are no longer receiving the money?
I don't think we're prepared to make that public yet, but in the coming days, that as we finalize a few last things.
Have they all been informed?
The ones that have received termination notices have been informed. Some of the ones that are getting reductions, we're still working with to figure out what that reduction needs to be, depending on what they'll be able to spend by the time of the end of the time period. So there's still some of that stuff that is not finalized.
And I would add that we've left ourselves some room in the finances and in the timing. So if we've made any mistakes and the vendors can show us that we've made mistakes, to correct our mistakes. Once that's all done, then we can distribute the list.
So let me play math here, because I went into your own, because I'm not good at
Yeah.
it. $1.3 million, you have 6 weeks.
$40 million.
$40 million.
No, okay, but.
1.3 million hours.
I'm sorry, 1.3 million hours, and you've got 6-week sessions, 4 days a week. Divide that, so it's 24, we've got 54,000 children, which is nowhere near 60% of the kids that are affected. So it seems like a little bit of a tease here.
No, it's not a tease. I think, how many children did you say it was?
54,000.
I think improving proficiency of 54,000 is very significant. It doesn't solve the whole problem. We have to deal with the money we've got. We can't generate money out of thin air, although some Democrats might think we can. But we can't generate money out of thin air, and we have to deal with the money we have. But a $40 million program for 1.3 million hours of tutoring is very major, and I don't think tease is a fair word to give it.
But you're going to have sometime when this thing goes live on whatever date that is in September, later this month.
Yeah.
You're going to have people sitting at their computer to be the first in line? I mean, is that how you're going to determine it?
I don't know how else we could do it except first come, first serve.
Okay.
So parents would have to go on this website September 15th, correct?
Yes.
15th.
That's when it's available. They can go anytime after that.
Okay, so they'll have to like apply online if they want their students to receive the tutoring, or how
Yes.
would it actually work?
Yeah, there'll be a form for them to apply.
And then it'll be like a time frame for them to hear a response to if they're approved or denied, and then how
And the-
soon after that will the tutoring start?
We're hoping to start by October 1st, if I'm not mistaken here.
And Mr. Guzman said that a not insignificant portion of the 40 million will go towards the testing and finding a contractor to deal
Well,
with. Can you
it-
give
it-
any more detail about that amount so we can just sort of
Yeah, I
understand
had said earlier that we actually have significant amount more than 40 million from the work we've done so far. So some of it will be available to correct any mistakes we may have made. Some of it will be available for the testing. My guess is that we'll really have the 40 million for 1.3 million hours.
Okay, so the testing contractor will not cut into the 40 million?
I'm hoping that it won't. I can't tell you exactly because we don't have the bids yet, but I'm hoping that it won't. I think it's significant that we only announced a $40 million program, but based on what we've done so far, we have significantly more than that.
Significantly more than that was clawed back, or significantly more?
That was clawed back.
Not much more.
Do you want me to?
Go ahead.
So in the initial run through, it's about 70 to 75 million. But again, we're allowing opportunities for those grantees to look at their programs and look at and try and give us evidence. So we've left plenty of buffer room to receive evidence that the programs are having an academic impact, and we've left buffer room for testing and those other issues.
And if
So you clawed back 60% to 70% of the money that was originally granted?
That's great.
And the 40 million is in the 70 to 70.
yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to promise less and achieve more. So we're only announcing a $40 million project, but it'll be more than that.
And I'm sorry, I think I was distracted when you were talking about the website. So parents, should they go through their schools or go to this website?
They go to the website, but the school districts will administer it. But they'll make their application in the website.
We'll
So
have
my
both
local
options,
school
yeah.
district will have a website for this.
I don't know. But we will have a website where they can apply. We are going to ask the districts to administer the program. You had a question? Okay. Anybody else?
So, but the parents don't necessarily know if their kids are at grade level, so there'll have to be some sort of screening process. You know, John and Mary Smith apply. Somebody has to determine whether they fit into one of these two
I would
categories.
think the parents would know whether their student tested proficient or not. Any other questions? If not, thank you all for coming.
Enjoy being had.